Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a global institution you hear about constantly in the news, but might still have some questions about: the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. We're going to map out its incredibly idealistic original blueprint and see how that stacks up against the really messy, complex reality of international justice today. Let's get into it. So here's our roadmap for this breakdown. First, a court for the world. Second, the four core crimes. Third, the membership gap, and finally, scandals and geopolitical friction. All right, Section 1, a court for the world and establishing the ICC in The Hague. Okay, so looking back, the foundational blueprint was actually drawn up with the Rome Statute in 1998, and it officially activated a few years later, entering into force on July 1st, 2002. You have to think of this as a massive, monumental shift in global justice. The whole idea was to create a permanent, standing judicial body. Rather than relying on temporary tribunals created after the fact, we'd have a court ready to step up and prosecute individuals for the absolute gravest crimes concerning the international community. Now, this is a vital distinction that trips people up all the time when following global news. The ICC is not the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. The ICC prosecutes individual people. We're talking about holding heads of state, military commanders, or rebel leaders personally accountable. The ICJ, on the other hand, settles legal disputes between entirely sovereign nations. It's the stark difference between putting a specific person on trial for atrocities and, say, arbitrating a border dispute between two countries. Which brings us to a really fascinating legal safety valve called the principle of complementarity. So why does this mechanism even exist? Well, it exists entirely to protect national sovereignty. The ICC doesn't just act as a global police force replacing national courts. No, it is an absolute court of last resort. It's only going to intervene if a country's own domestic legal system is genuinely unwilling or unable to investigate and prosecute these crimes itself. Essentially, if a nation does its job and holds its own citizens accountable, the ICC stays out. Moving on to Section 2, the four core crimes and the ICC's jurisdiction. You see, the Rome Statute doesn't just give the court blanket authority over any bad act happening anywhere. Its jurisdiction is strictly limited to four extreme categories: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Let's break down exactly what separates them because those legal distinctions are absolutely crucial. First up, genocide refers to acts intended to destroy, whether in whole or in part, a specific national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Contrast that with crimes against humanity, which involve widespread or systematic attacks directed against any civilian population. It's that specific intent to wipe out a defined group versus a widespread attack on civilians that legally distinguishes the two in a courtroom. Next, we have war crimes, which focus specifically on grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions and established laws of armed conflict. And finally, there's the crime of aggression. This essentially means a state using armed force against the sovereignty or political independence of another state. But it's worth noting that the activation rules for actually prosecuting aggression are notoriously complex. It's incredibly specific, making it one of the absolute hardest charges to successfully bring to The Hague. All right, Section 3, the membership gap, global reach versus global powers. There is no denying the ICC possesses a vast global reach. Right now, over 120 countries are signed on as states parties to the Rome Statute. Think about the scale of that for a second. That is a massive portion of the globe officially recognizing the court's jurisdiction, basically binding themselves to cooperate with its mandates and its arrest warrants. But, and this is a massive but, listen to the nations that are not members: the United States, China, Russia, and India. Yes, some of the world's largest, most heavily armed, and most populated nations operate entirely outside the ICC's jurisdiction. When these major global players are missing from the table, it drastically complicates international enforcement, turning global cooperation into an absolute geopolitical minefield. Which leads us right into Section 4, scandals and geopolitical friction, and navigating current crises. The court is currently navigating some pretty unprecedented internal upheaval. Recently, the ICC's Assembly of States parties voted overwhelmingly to dismiss Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan. This came after disciplinary proceedings related to sexual misconduct allegations. This closed-door decision by member states was frankly historic, leaving the court to manage a massive leadership transition while simultaneously trying to figure out its future prosecution strategies right in the middle of ongoing global conflicts.
And it's not just internal transitions. The court battles a constant barrage of high-profile viral misinformation. For example, widespread rumors recently popped up claiming that former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's trial had been rescheduled or delayed due to his worsening health. Well, fact-checkers had to step in fast to confirm that the pre-trial and trial schedules regarding cases tied to the Philippines' previous drug war actually remain officially on track. The ICC is essentially forced to constantly defend its own factual narrative.
Beyond internal strife and all the rumors, the ICC is caught in a vice of severe geopolitical pushback. Remember, it doesn't have its own police force, so it relies entirely on state cooperation to function, and this leads to intense diplomatic friction over unexecuted arrest warrants in conflict zones like Russia and Libya. The court is constantly trying to balance the pursuit of justice with the harsh reality of international sanctions, state non-cooperation, and just relentless pushback from those powerful non-member states we mentioned earlier. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought regarding the future of international law. Can a court of last resort truly enforce global justice without the cooperation of the world's biggest powers? Seriously, how effective can this beautifully designed, idealistic blueprint for justice actually be when the messy reality requires operating without the United States, China, Russia, and India? It's a paradox the international community will be navigating for decades to come. Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today.